I'm joined by Reverend David Ogolo. He's the Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice here in Nigeria. Thank you for coming to join us, David. I so appreciate it.
Thank you, Sas.
Great. I want us to start off from, you have followed transparency and open governance. You've had to do so much of work in the last couple of decades following issues of development. You and I talked here sometime third quarter 2020, and you mentioned how that we can't see real development until there's accountability, until there's transparency in government. Has much changed between the last time we were here and today?
Well, I have to be very careful. First, let me thank you and thank the ITV management. They're doing a fantastic job in trying to put these issues in the public domain. And ultimately, without the role of ITV in this part of the world, you will agree with me that the issue where we even were now, we won't achieve it. Right. I will say that there have been improvement, because if you say there haven't been improvement, then you are saying that organizations like ITV have not been doing anything. So you don't know where we would have been. And I try to use this imagery to try to explain that that there have been improvement. Probably you will not take notice of it. Right. You know, people say police are not very good in the society. All kind of name is labeled. But I just said, take the police out of the system, you understand.
For even one day.
You understand the value. But the problem is that is the 80-20 principle. When the 80-20 principle talks about just a minority can create a problem that create a large...
Rubs off.
Exactly. One or two policemen who have a criminal mind, who actions are not in compliance with the values of the police, their action can actually be perceived as general image for the police, and that's where they are today. And it is an historical, empirical evidence that these kind of things happened. Just one Nigerians goes abroad, commits a crime, they say Nigerians are criminal. So this is the real challenge that we have to face. But to come back again to where your question, there've been improvement, there's no doubt. For instance, Nigerians have addressed a number of issues, and that we cannot take for granted, and in areas where there have been improvement, for example, in the issues of asset recovery to the country, and making sure that the asset goes to a specific development project, that has been very successful, and that again has attracted global attention. I just came out of a UN consultation that yesterday in a teleconference where we were discussing the best practices of asset return, and Nigeria was cited as a good case because of how the $321.5 million was returned from Switzerland to Nigeria. So there's been some improvement. It depends on where you take it from. But in overall, looking into what Transparency International, the main big international anti-corruption agency in the country, in the world, the corruption perception index has not penned the improvement very well. Nigeria has not improved, rather they've declined in terms of the indices. If you look at the indices in the corruption perception index, it has been poor. And if you also look at the World Governance Index, Nigeria have not also performed very well. And the problem is that I begin to ask myself, because the incentive to perform is not the basis for election. You see, people are elected into power in Nigeria not because of their performance. It depends on where you are, which political party you belong to, which group you belong to. So the impunity, it encourages that performance is not a function of your ability to be elected into a position. And so because of this, it has been very difficult to quantify the improvement we have achieved in the country. And so because people don't pay price for whatever that happened. I just came out of a TV program now where we just released a big report where we identify 113 ministry, department and agencies across the country, whether they are complying to the open contracting portal framework in the country. What we found was very disturbing. Over 79 ministries, department agencies do not comply. They don't even have a data on their procurement system. And that is even becoming very disheartening, perhaps in this period of time where the country need all the resources to fight the coronavirus crisis. And so in terms of governance, you can see that major part of the country is currently under the control of the bandits. And that, for me, tells you where we are going. Okay. Now, the federal government have also come out that bandit flies going to Zamfara. You know the implication in terms of investment, and Zamfara is one of the poorest of the poorest in the country. Right. And then the Northeast now is more or less almost becoming ungovernable. It's becoming a fragile environment. And that's, for me, raises a serious concern about where we are going. And that's why in most governance or anti-corruption literature, you see the correlation between governance and corruption and development. Where there is huge, widespread corruption, you can't talk about development. And the absence of credible governance system leads to poor development, and the human capital indices are very poor. And Nigeria is a special case for that. So I would say that we have recorded success in some area, but in some area we have performed very poorly.
We're going to talk about some of those elements that make Nigeria a special case in a bit. But first, I mean, you have followed the Abacha route over time, for instance. Are we not being narrow-minded in our approach? Because it appears that recovery, as we know it, is now limited to Abacha route.
No, it's just that Abacha was a former head of state. Right. So his name rings bell. I am a member of the Presidential Committee on asset for future disposal in the country. And I've had the opportunity, I've worked in this area for the past 30 years, that there are quite a number of recovery that the federal government has recovered from overseas, from different private sector. People are coming on their own to disclose, and they are returning assets. But you know, Abacha is like a poster child for asset recovery. Abacha is a poster child for grand corruption. You know, if you are familiar with the literature on corruption and governance, Abacha is a special case study. Even when I was doing my master's on corruption and governance in University of Sussex in London, my classmates, they were focusing their project work on Abacha, because Abacha's name is like, another name for Abacha is corruption. Is big thief, you know. So it's easy. Once when you mention Abacha, what resonates in the mind of people around the world is a man who God has given opportunity to rule his country, but he chooses to use the country's wealth for his family and himself. So there's nothing wrong about it. But the real reality is that if you are conversant with the recovery Nigeria is currently undertaking, there are quite a number of recovery that is coming into the country. And if you look what now but the series of recovery that have gained global media attention is Abacha. And there's nothing wrong about it. He was the former president. It's like, you know, there are certain things, it's just like you and Uyi. For example, if you are in Benin now, you are driving, and you drive somehow on the traffic, you'll be surprised number of people that will draw your attention. Say, Uyi, are you this ITV man? You know, so because you are a public figure. Visibility. Visibility, exactly. Right. So Abacha is very visible, and what he did in Nigeria, what he did with the Nigerian treasury is unacceptable. It is, you cannot, it's mind-boggling. The kind of robbery that he embarked on. As a matter of fact, the Swiss government have to declare Abacha and his family as a criminal gang. Hello? A competent court in Switzerland, before the money was forfeited to the Nigerian government, a competent court in Switzerland declared the Abacha and his family as a criminal gang, which there means that all their assets around the world was frozen. And in the process of identifying them and returning them back to the country, the last one they just returned was from Dublin, Ireland. And some of this money is going to the major 3 infrastructure that the federal government have identified. That's why I said that in the areas of asset recovery, the government have been effective. And moving beyond that, the federal government have also seen that there have been some issue of lack of transparency in the disposal of those assets.
What are best practices for disposal of assets, for example?
So now, serving in that committee, without sounding that we're doing the best we can, the first thing we did in that committee was to first set up a conflict of interest in the committee. And we went ahead to also do a media strategy for the committee. How do we communicate to the public? Just yesterday now, they've opened the bid. And they opened the bid, over 350 people who are going to help to assess the assets seized across the entire country by all the anti-corruption agency, EFCC, ICPC, even the police, custom, NDLA, all the assets seized. The federal government have now announced that they've been disposed of.
So do we have a repository of these assets?
Yes, the database has been established. And it was very, with funding from the British government, we helped the federal government to design a framework and that led to government coming out with a policy on the issue of forfeited asset, on how to manage them. This was carried out in absence of a legal framework, like the Proceed of Crime Bill that I told you that have been in the National Assembly for a long time, and that bill has not been passed into law. Why has it not been passed into law? It's again this part of the thing that sends the wrong signal about the country's system. And so because of the absence of that Proceed of Crime Bill law in the country, the current country asset recovering architecture is very poor. For instance, you look, for you to be able to gain the attention of a returning state, that is a country like Switzerland, US, for them to cooperate with you, a mutual legal assistance you request is on the basis of the domestic framework you put in place that will give an assurance that your request is not politically influenced. And because they don't want a situation where the rule of laws are not followed. So for you to gain a cooperation of another jurisdiction, you have to show and demonstrate that you have a system that is not being influenced and that your decision is based on rule of law. And that can only come to evidence if you put in laws and agreement. And going further, like I earlier on mentioned, the reviews on Nigerian legal system and financial system is not very healthy. If you look into the IMF Article 4 report on Nigeria, the reports are not very healthy. If you look into the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index, the reports are not healthy. If you look into the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, 2 reviews that have been carried out on Nigeria, the reports are not healthy. If you look into the Basel Anti-Money Laundering Index report on Nigeria, the reports are not healthy. Just to give you a classical implication of this, on the Basel Anti-Money Laundering Index that looks into the money laundering policies in the country, they have seen that Nigeria is in the bottom line because of our weak money laundering laws in the country. And that have encouraged the criminals and armed robbers and all to be able to move money around, to buy guns, to import it into the country. Because if your financial system is not clean, people with dubious character can take an advantage of it. And that's why you see that the Yahoo thing is very effective in Nigeria, because our financial system is not effective. If you put in a good anti-money laundering system in place, it will be difficult for somebody to move millions of dollars across the financial system. But because I just heard now, I read just a while ago, and that even people you think that are up there, a very popular Oba, said $2 million was missing in his palace.
Oh, that's outside the 17 million naira.
So, you know, if an American government hears that, because it's maddening.
$2 million.
$2 million in your house. That is, it is unheard. How can you legitimately defend $2 million, which means government cannot pay tax on that? That's criminal himself. If that happens in abroad, that Bawa will be facing prosecution. Because first, you are denying the government of tax, legitimate tax. Because if that money is in your income tax will be based on the basis of the amount of asset that you have. So you're keeping that money in the house is to deny the federal government access to know about your asset. So this is what a poor anti-money regime can cost in a country. You know, the implication is that when you have a poor anti-money laundering regime, it makes it possible for criminals. And that's what is happening in the northeast part of the country. That's why the criminals from Niger, from the borders, are able to come in with resources and move resources out. If you have a brother overseas, ask him how is it very easy to move money around? It is not easy. And then if you look into the private sector, the banking system, you also look into the anti-money laundering rules, how they comply, know your customer's rule. These are basic rules that are applied. Before you open an account for somebody, there are some basic data you need to collect from this person. That's why I'm happy with the national identity card that they are doing now. I hope the federal government will take it very seriously. A country that does not know the number of the citizen, it is unacceptable. And this is not very good for the country. And it makes the whole system to be very poor, and governance system is very poor. And I'm very encouraged that even within some state governments are now beginning to see that for you to govern properly, you need to even have some level of data. Right. If you don't have the data, there's no way you can govern properly. And I'm happy that Edo State is taking the lead on that. But at the same time is for the federal government to understand that the only way to tackle the problem of corruption and governance issue in the country is to put institutions in place. Let's take, for example, the petroleum industry bill. Right. A while ago, the members of the National Assembly paid consultation to Edo State, and they're trying to solicit feedback from people. Let me remind you that I'm a lead campaigner on the petroleum industry bill. I've been involved in the petroleum reform sector for the past 20 years. My brother, can you ask, why will the federal government, why will the political elite in the country not want a reform in that sector, particularly knowing that that sector is what is responsible for our income to run the governance of this country? Right. But the level of corruption in the oil and gas sector is mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling. Could
that be what has been delaying the PIB, which at
definitely,
point
because one of the contentious area that is now an obstacle to the reform is the issue of conflict of interest.
Right. Between communities, host communities,
apart from the community,
and the IOCs.
For example, NNPC. You cannot be at the same time a regulator, at the same time participating in the economy.
As a player.
As a player. Take, for example, you are a member of a legislature. You are serving in a banking committee, and you have 2 banks. Hello? It's only in Nigeria you have things like that.
But of course, you can divest your interest from those banks while you are a legislator. Is that not possible?
It's possible if it's done transparently. Okay. But in the case of Nigeria, you still control the bank. You are still the owner of the bank.
Actively involved.
And you are in the National Assembly, in the banking committee, so you make laws for your banks.
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. So that's why, for you to tackle corruption, fighting corruption, you look into the issue of conflict of interest. It's fundamental in moving forward in this country.
And we're still challenged in that area.
Exactly.
2 things I want to talk to you about. The Nigerian corruption case has been called 2 basic things: systemic and institutional.
Yes.
That means it has become grand corruption.
Yes.
As you and I know. Now, the EFCC is the #1 anti-corruption agency in this country.
Yes.
Ultimately. I don't want to drag much of the EFCC into whether or not they have been doing effectively well. But there's new leadership in place now. Recall that the EFCC has had leadership issues over time. Today, Mr. Abdulrasheed Bawa, a 40-year-old Nigerian, is the chairman of that commission. Does that put lights at the end of the tunnel for us as a country?
Well, we have, as an organization working on anti-corruption issue in the country for a long time now, we'll be following up all the politics and whatever anything that has been happening in EFCC. First, we congratulate Bawa, a young man. This is a God-given opportunity for him to either be on the side of darkness or on the side of light. And our prayer for him to be on the side of light, because it's a huge opportunity. But like I said, you must understand the political economy of the decision that led to his appointment and the reason why previous leadership has failed in Nigeria. And so, having said that, it's our wish that we continue to support him, and that's why I also say that I mentioned very strongly to friends that we should be very careful how we throw stones, because there is nowhere we're going to get a cent in Nigeria to run our institution. But the most important thing is that once somebody is appointed, we should look for a way to support those people to succeed. Because, for example, if Bawa succeeds, it's in the interest of Nigerians. If he fails, it's not in our interest. And if you look what has happened to previous leadership of EFCC, they failed obviously because each time somebody is appointed into EFCC, the number of people who wants them to fail is more than the number of people who wants them to succeed. Because those who want them to fail, they are very vocal, they are very influential, they're looking for political opportunism to advance their narrow interests, and they do it in a way that as if they were pursuing the larger interests of the society. But some of us have responsibility to begin to isolate those issues and put it out there in the public domain, that we have responsibility to support the new leadership in EFCC and to show that Bawa can succeed. First, he has got the academic background, he has got the qualification, he's got all it takes to make EFCC function very well, and from his few statements and his presentation at the National Assembly, he has shown that he should be trusted. On the basis of this, we should move forward by supporting him. But now, if the federal government is to support him, Nigerian people have to support him, we must also help to provide ideas, because he doesn't have the exclusive idea to run the institution. You need a country, because the level of corruption in Nigeria is systemic. It's becoming a cultural thing that, you know, in dealing with the challenge, we must understand that one single institution like EFCC can't solve the problem. There are multifarious problems in the country. So we must tackle it from different perspectives. And one of the things that we've been doing recently that is a bit innovative in anti-corruption crusade is the issue of the social norm. You know, corruption is becoming a norm. It's, you know, everybody just participating. You might not know, either knowingly or unknowingly, participating in the corruption. So to solve the problem, we must look for a way to reverse that norm, where everybody will begin to change attitude towards corruption, and begin to show that corruption does not pay, and that crime does not help anybody, and it doesn't help any society. So the public do have a responsibility if EFCC will succeed, because EFCC alone cannot fight the fight. ICPC alone cannot fight the fight. Then it brings us to the issue of the political will. I emphasize that. As a student of anti-corruption, when we were studying in UK, one of the key areas we focus on dealing with the challenge of corruption is the issue of political will. What is political will? I give you an example, because our audience probably will be listening to what does it mean by political will, because the definition of political will is a bit controversial in literature. But I would say the street interpretation is that you have a governor who will say something, he will follow it through.
Right.
And we can give an example of Governor Obaseki, for instance. When he said, we don't need Agberus, he followed it through. And you know what that brought? It brought sanity.
And he needed political will to do that.
Exactly. Then, when Governor Obaseki and the Oba of Benin came together, that is traditional force and government force, came together, they tackled the issue of community development.
Associations.
If you interview anybody in Edo State, one of the key obstacles to housing development in Edo State was the activity of those community boys. But when there was a partnership between the government and the Oba, what happened? That came to an end. People now seek their borehole. People now go on development without no molestation. That is what we call political will. Obaseki demonstrated what is called political will on the issue of Agbero, on the issue of community development levy, what they call DEVE. Right. Are you seeing now? So, and you can see the result. If such political will is brought to bear on other areas of governance, yes, there will be success. But you know, understanding the political economic analysis of those areas, you find out that who were the actors, who were the beneficiaries of the status quo. They were not as powerful. But in the case of corruption, in the grand corruption, the beneficiaries are very powerful. Yeah. So the same methodology to adopt to bring in the political will is a big challenge. And that's what anti-corruption literatures are exploring. And that's what we, the practitioners, are also looking forward to see. How do we encourage political elite to understand that in the long run, they are all losing? Yeah. Now, for example, the roads are not good. Money voted to build roads, you put it in your private pocket. Who pays price for it? Either your family or your people. And sometimes it kills them. Now, when the coronavirus happened, what happened? You have found out that this political elite cannot travel again to abroad. You see, a number of them have died. And because the hospitals are not well equipped. Look, when I went to Stella Ambassador, an uncle of mine had coronavirus. And he was taken through Stella Ambassador. First, I want to thank the entire management of Stella Ambassador. Those doctors there are doing an excellent work in the face of lean resources. And I want to appeal to the governor to see what he can do. He should also exercise the same political will he did in Agberus, the same political will he did in what the other one? CDA. The CDA. He should also put it in the health sector. We should put our mouth where our money is. I know the government is trying their best. But what is happening in Stella Obasanjo, it is unacceptable. They don't even have light. In that very day I went to Stella Obasanjo, only one doctor was dealing with patients of more than...
That's a state-owned health facility.
Exactly. So that is absence of political will there. And I know that there is resource challenge, but you know the deadly implication of the coronavirus. If you don't treat it, if you don't handle it very well, we are all involved.
Okay,
this is the kind of political will that needs to be brought to bear.
That we need to begin to advance. Let me, just before we let you off, one more issue to address quickly here in a couple of minutes. The EFCC Act of 2004 provides for the president to appoint the executive chairman of the commission. But some persons are not saying, hold on a second, that doesn't work, because we've seen the president appoint since 2004 with the very first chairman of the commission being Mr. Nuhu Rebadu, for example. So they are saying, allow people to rise through the ranks up until that point where they become the executive chairman of the commission, because there's the concern that on account of the fact that we know for, real time, that he who pays the piper dictates the tune, for example, or the music. So they feel there's a chance that the president can influence the direction of certain cases on account of the fact that he's the one who appoints the chairman. Have you been bothered about this sort of issue?
Yes, you see, as an anti-corruption expert, there are different practices. There are different, like Singapore, for example, they have different models. The model that we're operating here, where the president appoints and then the National Assembly approves, it's not a bad practice. Okay. It's not. Even if you allow, like Bawa now, it emerged through the ranks. So I don't see that as a problem. Like I said, the problem is political will. There is a challenge in the country, which we all agree. You know, the problem is that it's like a man who is not in the football pitch. He stays outside.
He sees all the mistakes.
He sees all the mistakes, and then he's always criticizing. But when he's inside the pitch, he understands that sorry, I have to speak Benin here now. So,
in other words, what you see from the outside is different from the reality on the pitch.
On the pitch. So this is the reality. Right. So president appointing is not the real problem. As a matter of fact, President Buhari, as you know, won the election on the basis of an anti-corruption campaign. Nigerians trusted him. They believe in him. So in appointing somebody, you see, if you look at the history of all the previous chairman of EFCC, there's an insinuation that it has come from one part of the region. You see, all this is an attempt to discredit the recruitment process. You see, there is a problem in Nigeria. The recruitment process in Nigeria is very poor. And when you recruit on the basis of tribe, where you come from, what will be the outcome? Zero. If you recruit, even at the local government level, at the state government level, if your recruitment process is influenced by corruption, by religion, what you will get will not be the best. So the recruitment process that the federal governments continue to patronize on the basis of recommendation from the president, during the legislative process for approval, all Nigerians are represented in the National Assembly. If there was going to be an issue, they should be able to raise it there. Some people will say, no, the National Assembly is a compromise. You can't say so. It's a sweeping statement. People that are in the National Assembly went through process. Whether that process is 40 or not,
it's a different issue altogether.
Exactly. People will know. So it is easy to make a sweeping statement. Nigerians are the ones that are in the National Assembly. You and I, we have people who represent us in the National Assembly. How often do we engage these people? Democracy is not a one-way traffic, it's a two-way traffic. The government. Exactly. The followers have responsibility. But what we have in Nigeria, the followers think that once you elect your leaders, you expect them to perform miracles. No, you need to hold your leaders accountable. There is a responsibility on Nigerians to hold government accountable. Now President Buhari has nominated Bawa. He's gone through the National Assembly process. He has now been approved as a substantive chairman of EFCC. He behoves us, Nigerians, to now, on the basis of the things that he said during the hearing process, to hold him accountable to those commitments. We should not be, we should be optimistic. We should build a society. There is a challenge, but no doubt. But we should build a society where there is possibility. There could be weaknesses. We identify those weaknesses, raise an alarm for it, and that's what we do as an organization. And when there are opportunity for partnership with government, we partner. When there are opportunity for us to raise our hand, we raise our hand. But ultimately, once a government is elected, it behoves us to recognize that government. If you disagree with that government, whether about the election or the process, go to court. Yeah. And then the other thing is that the court has been brought over. That's another thing entirely. Because we cannot allow chaos to happen. When chaos happens, we all suffer. So to follow the rule of law, we have all responsibility to work towards it. And that's why, again, I want to use this opportunity to thank the ITV management. And that's what exactly you guys are doing here. Day in and day out in your program, you're raising awareness. But people need now to take those awareness to the next level. ITV will not be on the street to be marching, but they create an awareness. They provide a platform for people to articulate their issue. People like us also have benefited from this ITV commitment to a better society. society, to a just society. And on the basis of that, we have launched programs that has helped to raise an awareness in Edo State, in Nigeria, internationally. So we should not be despair. We are making an improvement. We are succeeding. But you know, they say Oliver asks for more. Yeah. We will continue to ask for more and continue to improve the system.
To ask for more, of course, by all means we will. Reverend David Ogolo is the Executive Director of African Network for Environment and Economic Justice. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, my brother.
To share your very salient thoughts with us on the program. This is where we're leaving it with this very brilliant discussion. We'll be back shortly to put the icing on the cake on TMI this Thursday. Stay with me.